a guest lecture series by Emeritus India Career Services. I am Sugandha and I will be moderating this session today. Now, if you have any questions during the presentation, please type them in the Q&A box and we'll bring them up at the end of the session. Our guest for today is Adity Pal Singh. He is a talent acquisition professional with a progressive career in multicultural and matrix environment. He has specialist and functional skills that have been proven over 21 years, spanning the entire gamut of talent acquisition, with a blend of working in both consulting in MNC organizations and a career span predominantly focusing on talent acquisition globally. He has designed and deployed talent acquisition strategy to meet the talent growth needs and then making sure that it is executed effectively. Also, he has the exposure to setting up recruitment processes and development of recruitment tools and technology. To achieve all this, he has built and managed recruitment teams and enhanced recruiter capability by various interventions. Please join me in welcoming our guest speaker. Our topic for today is workforce of the future. Mr. Aditya, welcome, and the stage is all yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening to all of you. It's a rainy evening in Bangalore. It stopped raining for a change now. But yeah, good weather here. So thank you very much for taking out time on your evening on a Friday. I'm sure you might be interested to do something else. So the topic which I wanted to speak to you is pretty relevant to everybody who's been working. And I am not a SME in this area, just wanted to share my experience, right? Workforce of the future is a very large subject, right? Future is not what you don't go somewhere, right? You create it, right? There are a lot of variables. You look around you, the government, the people, the companies, they determine the direction, right? It's, as somebody said long time back, it's the choices which you make, right? From a futuristic standpoint, there are a lot of information available, right? Because we are living in a world which is data driven, right? And that's the fuel of the future, right? And it's very important for you to look at some of these patterns. You look at some of these patterns and put some correlation and say, okay, this might work from a futuristic standpoint, right? But then there is too much of data overload, and there are enough tools in the market which will help you, grow as an individual or also understand what are the various trends, right? So there are terms like, people like who are called futurists. You should go and read some of their reports. They talk very specific to a particular industry. It gives you a bearing of what the future would look like from a long-term perspective. That's my perspective. So coming on to my slides, the first, law which it's not extensively written, but there's a lot written about it, is the Martek's law, which basically says that the rate of change of technology is far more faster as compared to the adoption of technology. Now, the blue line is the organization, and the yellow line is predominantly the technology. Look at every area which you have been, and especially example, let's take phones, right? To 20 years back, to having a landline to today is, it's changed so phenomenally. And if you see in the last 6-7 years, telephone itself has evolved at a much faster rate, right? It's not called a telephone. It's an instrument which you can work and do everything together. So, communication has become much more faster. But then what's happening with the organization is their adoption has been very slow. While there is a lot of technological advancements, you have a lot of companies, people who specialize in particular areas, but company adopting to it is slow. The best example is COVID, right? And some of you who would have studied at that period of time, if you had asked pre-COVID to anybody and everybody around that, will you work in a world where the classes will be online? They said, no, it's not possible. Forget this, the teacher won't even agree to it. And then you had batches which passed out virtual. And then we've now looking in a world of hybrid. But we were forced to take up that change by virtue of what happened around us, right? So the gap has decreased, but then it's still there, right? The technological change is still far more faster as we move forward. So, what are the trends which I've been seeing from a individual standpoint is, right? One is, the rate of change of technology, which we spoke about, right? And the Martech law talks about, right? If you look at the shelf life of any technology, it's fast moving. What was hot at a particular period of time has changed. A lot of things have moved around. Internet of things has become an important part of our lives. Any company to every company requires digital adoption, irrespective, even if you are in pharma, manufacturing, or consumer durable. There is, right? Look at, we are doing this session. I don't need to physically come and do this session. We're doing it on Zoom, right? And companies need to adapt to this rate of change of technology at a much more faster pace, right? So that is one. So there is a big workforce shift, right? You look at if you are the Gen Z, that means there are 4 generations of workforce which has moved in. So imagine from an employer standpoint how difficult and how different it is. Gen Z is the one which has walked in with all the lives having a tablet or phone in their hand vis-a-vis the other generation, and their expectations out of life is very different from the other generations, because what defines our expectations is what we see through childhood, right? So that's how what defines our expectations. So managing different generations, managing their expectations, moving to a very personalized workforce, right? Will play a very, very important part from an organization perspective, because organizations are also looking at not only full-time, they're looking at consultants, they're looking at contractors, they're looking at various ways of looking at it. Some people would want to work only 4 days a week. So there is a lot of change in expectations, and organizations now, where they are, need to slowly adopt to all of these, changes around, right? So it becomes a very different play game altogether. Skill gap. Uh, I think everybody speaks about it. A lot of colleges, by virtue of not being autonomous, are getting into a situation where they need to understand the curriculum has not moved for them, right? If they are autonomous, their curriculum has moved. So what sometimes you're taught and what you land up doing training is very different, right, to some extent. So the adoption to that, the adoption to online, skills, which I will anyways was my next point on, how online education has come into play extensively and will play an important part, because today understand, I think we are going away from an era of showing certifications to doing courses which will help us either do a current job better, and for doing that you might do a course from a Coursera, or you might just pick up something from YouTube, to doing some certification course from a long-term perspective which will help you grow from a career standpoint. What online has evolved and the way thinking has evolved is it is customizable, right? Companies are now slowly moving away from an era of, we have X training and then everybody will go ahead and apply for those trainings. So it's more personalized as we move further up from a career standpoint. That's the direction. And the other, big thing, before I go to me and to we, is the other big trend is the lifespan and the longevity of people, right? Now, we were living in an era where life expectancy maybe a century back was 30 years. To today, it is about 65 to 68 years, right? It has changed. So that means your workforce itself has changed a lot, right? But then there are countries which are going through a very different phase of work, right? 26% in, Japan is the aging population. They are looking for more younger generation. So it's an aging economy, right? Vis-a-vis, the life expectancy in other countries is far more higher. right? As we move forward, a lot of companies will try and look at, re-looking at the retirement age, which will play an important part. And I'm sure some of you have seen the reports which has happened in France, because all of them would want to move it to a standardized way. Because since your age expectancy has gone up, and people may not work for a government job, there is a tendency of saying that how do I fill my time and how do I move forward from a career standpoint, right? There is a concept called leaning out, which basically talks about saying that instead of retiring, why don't you work with us for only, maybe instead of 8 hours, maybe do 4 hours, or maybe twice a week, thrice a week. This way you continue to work. I don't lose the talent pool which I have from a career standpoint, and everything becomes far more important as we speak further. So I want to talk about life expectancy, because lot of it has changed as we are moving forward from a career standpoint to a very different me economy to a we economy. We move from a production base to a shared responsibility. Look at the companies around you. They are now engaging with the state. If you're working in companies, they do a lot of work with the CSR, but also engaging around a lot of other active participants. It's become far more inclusive society. Earlier organizations were very boxed in. There's a lot of sharing of information. There's webinars like this. There are meetups. There are a lot of other things. There is a website called meetup.com which only does meetups, and we have people on core technology companies host these kind of companies. So there is a shift towards a far more faster, more sustainable, more what's the right word, more meaningful model, and more good life, the way we look at from a long-term perspective. And that's the direction companies are looking at from a trend standpoint. That's the direction they see. There is a big concept of trust and transparency, and any of you who want to join an organization, you would want to understand how is the organization, what do they talk about, what do they believe in. They can't hide away from things. They need to be very plain and clear. And if they hide about it, you have those the sites like Glassdoor and few other places where you can read about the organization. And companies need to live in a setup where they need to be transparent of what's happening with them, how are the things forward. People would want to understand what are the research, what is the online exposure of that company. So a lot of companies will have to work harder to build trust, transparency, growing their online exposure to social media, influencing, and everything else, because that's the direction companies are also moving into, because they know for a fact that the workforce today would want to understand why they would want to work for you, right? Example. And there is a big term called employee value proposition, EVP, right, which plays an important part, which says that why do you want to join this organization? What is that so different for you to join this organization? How will it help from a career standpoint? What are the mission, vision? So today, the candidates, employees, people would want to understand that. And that's why I said, talked about trust and transparency as we move forward from a career standpoint. Smart tech and IoT, I don't need to tell any of you about that. We live in a world we want to control things, right? Tech enables us, right? I'm sure some of you have those tech enable where you'll switch on your geyser, switch on some of your lights, some of the thing before you even walk into the house, right? You save so much time. It's become a part of us, our lives, right? Because best example is online shopping. For you to go to a shop to vis-a-vis buying it online, it becomes easier. You're enabled to do a lot of things via your own phone, and more physical boundaries are dissolved because you can pick up anything from anywhere. It's a matter of time how soon or how late it'll get delivered. But smart tech will play an important part, and IoT obviously as we move forward, right? As we move forward from a organization standpoint. If you look at, there was a survey done and I was reading it, they said 70% of the people would want to live in cities, right? And there are about 80% of the Gen Z would want to continue to live in a place where they will be enabled to express themselves, right? Working in different cultures, working in other companies. So I think so the best example is when we were in the COVID situation, work from home, working with global teams, working, understanding different parameters, expectations from everybody else plays an important part, and becoming more across the world, moving people across the globe, understanding the culture, because we're slowly moving into not regional but agile teams, smaller teams working together, having a presence, so that your decision is also very inclusive, but you move in the right direction as we move from a long-term career standpoint from a very different angle. You look at a better place and a global sustainer. I think clean tech, there's a lot of emphasis on that, a conscious consumption of transparency. Leaders, as leaders, will need to really rethink about their fundamental strategic question of saying that, simple way of looking at it is saying that why we exist, where should we be focused, how are we different, why should people choose our products, and who would want to work for us, and why would people invest in us. I like this line. I don't know who had written this. It was a very interesting line, which is, we must make aspiration attainable, sustainable, and sustainable affordable. I read it somewhere and I found this very, very interesting from a line standpoint. So those were the trends, and I'm sure there are a lot of other trends, but these are some of the trends which I have looked at, which will play an important part from a long-term perspective of career and everything else. And as we move forward to a world which has become more fungible, more adaptable. Now look at, I would recommend that, sorry, water. Look at these future skills from a very different lens of what are the skills from a futuristic standpoint. Map it to some of the skills which you might have used from a interviewing standpoint when you would have got interviewed. Some of these skills is from a long term is what your employer from a futuristic standpoint might be looking at, right? So we live in a world where nothing is repetitive, and if it's repetitive, why do we need humans? We get into a world where there are a lot of complex problem solving, and your ability to solve these complex problems, understand the trends, because no problem will be unique, right? Ability to see through things, ability to solve it will play a very, very important part from a futuristic standpoint as we move forward. Critical thinking, I think, is the ability to think more critically, ability to think what can be done, what can't be delivered, playing both sides of the table, understanding the long-term goal, taking a thought after decision from anything, then taking a rash decision from a career standpoint will play an important part as we look at from a skill standpoint. Creativity, I think this is the difference between us and the machines, and creativity plays an important part because any work which we do, and some of you who work in projects, you get into a situation where you need to either solution it, but also look at creative solutions from a perspective. So more creative, the better it is, the way you're looking at, because it enables the other person to see that you're looking at the problem very differently as anybody else would look at it. Because if it's redundant and same, there's no difference between you and the next person, right? So creativity plays an important part from an individual standpoint, from a long-term career standpoint, so that it enables you to, think through what needs to get delivered, how it needs to get delivered from a long-term perspective, right? People management. While it sounds very easy, you will live in a world, or you will live in a world where you will have to work with someone across the globe, someone working from home, someone working from house, someone who's a consultant, someone who's a contractor, someone else across. Working with a machine where you need to program it and making sure that it works. So ability to influence and manage people, even if you're not the supervisor, getting things done, getting things delivered, looking at the long-term perspective of any action will play a very, very important part as we move forward from a career standpoint. So people management plays an important part, which is also a subset to coordinating with others, which I talked about, right? When you are running a project and you are the project lead, sometimes by virtue of the level or your ability to get things done, you are able to do that. But working with others, making sure that they attain their goals, but at the same time, you are also in a position to making sure that from a long-term perspective, they will, vis-a-vis work with you to deliver your own goals plays an important part. So coordinating with others, not selfishly looking at only your goals from a long-term perspective, but looking at both the goals, looking at a win-win situation where you can look at both perspective, and then from a long-term perspective, delivering on those goals plays an important part from an individual standpoint. Emotional intelligence, I'm sure all of you have read books on that. It's basically EI, basically in a position to work, understand, not sympathize, but empathize, understanding the other's perspective, but then delivering on what is required from an organization perspective plays an important part. You can't be not empathetic. I think it played an important part when we were especially when we were in the COVID era. You saw a lot of leaders showing their emotional side of talking about how things are. So playing that as an important part plays an important long-term skill which is required from a futuristic standpoint, not only looking at what can be done from an individual standpoint, right? A lot of the decisions today most of us take are short-term. Say I need to get this delivered so things can be done better, or looking at saying that if I take this decision will help me get promotion or put me in the right light from a long-term perspective. Taking judgment, deciding what is, and then seeing the long-term impact of saying that if I'm going to take this, what's the long-term impact? How will it shape the future, right? Not only looking at from a short term, but from a long term of saying that if I take X decision of saying that, example, from an individual standpoint of saying that, hey, you are in crossroads, but then once you understand that you need to do this, shift your career into a different line altogether. But on a long term, you will be in a very different state where you can grow as an individual and maybe elongate your career. Is a good decision making, right? You're not looking at short term, right? Short term would be saying that I let me stay here, I'll get promotion and then continue doing what I'm doing. But taking the hit and saying, okay, I might take a hit from a career standpoint initially, but long term I'll be in a much better place. So a lot of those decisions from a career standpoint, just an example to illustrate the work. Service orientation is not KYC, know your customer, but anticipating your customer expectations, telling them that these are the problems they might face before they even getting into it. I think that's called service orientation. And A lot of companies are large scale service companies, and end of the day, it's what they deliver on the table. And if they can anticipate a lot of things for their client before they even getting into it, is a wow factor. So, service orientation, but not only knowing, but also understanding from a futuristic standpoint what can be done and what can't be, working with them to deliver what can be or what can't be delivered from a career, from a long-term perspective. Negotiation, it's a very simple word of saying that, hey, I will negotiate, and but sometimes they say you need to lose a battle to win a war. So sometimes you need to be in a position to understand what's the long term, short term impact of negotiation. But the skill will play an important part, as you said, because it reads into your people management skills, your service orientation skills, your judgment skills. It's an important skill to have, getting things done, making sure sometimes you are helping someone achieve their goal, or maybe someone else is helping you achieve your goal. So it has to be a two-way traffic as we move forward. But it's a very, very important skill as we move forward from a career standpoint. Cognitive flexibility, I would recommend you spending some time. It's your ability to look at multiple things and making sure that you can see through what needs to get delivered, right? Seeing through a jungle of information what has started in the starting. I'm saying that, okay, I can switch off one thing and then switch on something else, or do multiple things at the same time. So your ability to do multiple things, or maybe ability to switch off, switch on, and then move forward very quickly, plays an important part and plays an important skill as we move forward, because you will get into situations where you are working on a project or something goes wrong, but suddenly you are working on something else which goes in a very different direction. Your ability to shut down and not have the impact of the first situation impacting the second one plays an important part. So this is a very, very important skill, as we move forward. This I read, long term back, somewhere, of saying that, and this era of specialists and journalists will come and go and all that. But, I think somewhere in COVID, we realized that, you need to work in agile teams. So, so if you look at the alphabet T, which says, good understanding of your peripheral functions while you are an SME in one particular area, right? Because you will get into a situation where you might be asked to lead teams, and you can't lead other teams when you don't have the information. I'm not asking you to be an SME in all the other areas, but I'm asking you to be an SME in one area, but understanding all your peripheral area, because when you lead those agile teams, you need to have some understanding of peripheral. I'll give you my example. So I've been in talent acquisition, but I have led projects which are in HR. But because I have a good understanding of what a compensation benefit person does, what a learning and development person does, what an HRBP does. So understanding your peripheral, but then also delivering from a long-term perspective. Because as we move forward, as I said, you will work in agile teams, right? Cross-cultural, cross everything else from a long-term perspective plays an important part from a career standpoint. I think this is my last slide. I didn't want it to be very heavy. It'll be good if I can answer quite a few questions. See, before I come to this slide is, if you look at, the world, it's moving in the last 3-4 years, it's moved at a much faster pace. The expectations of individuals, the expectations of people have changed. Look at your own expectations of life pre-COVID to what it is today. Look at the way you look at your own work pre-COVID to what it is today. So it has changed a lot. And there are a lot of things which I initially spoke about: career, age, organization, workforce, different dynamic shifts, and everything else will evolve as we move forward. But you need to see the trend lines. Okay, one is the trend line which I spoke about initially, and secondly are the skills which the organization takes. especially some of my friends and a lot of my people, especially in the technology, say HR interview happened. I don't know why was this person asking this kind of skills. Now look at those skills which I talked about, and then say, okay, they were trying to judge you on those kind of skills and saying that have you been in these situations, because as we move, have you been in these situations, because that's the only real example while they'll have. Now coming to this slide, there has been seismic shifts, invention of electricity, industrial revolution was the most important part, right? As we move forward, 2000 was digital, web, internet, moved in a very different perspective. And now the third one is your global pandemic, right? We're looking at, I think we are still in a post of work from home, flexibility. Everybody is looking at things more differently. All organizations are learning from each other. So these, I feel, have been a pillars of changes which has happened and impacted us very extensively, because the way we look at things more different, right? As we move forward, because electricity was more production based, digital was more getting into the web, hybrid is the way you look at things can be delivered and done from everything else, getting the world together. So so as I said, for me, workforce of the future has moved a lot in a very different way. My 2 cents to all of you is look at some of the skills, try and understand what's the long-term impact of you doing some of these activities from a career standpoint, right? Which will play an important part. So I just wanted to end my so I just wanted to end my slides with all of this. Sorry, I'm just trying to get the hang of my laptop. So yeah, so I just wanted to end those with that perspective. Please feel free to ask questions, because I didn't want to be a override of information. I feel anything more than 20-25 minutes is a killer from a long-term perspective. So I'll hand it back to you. Thank you very much.
Great. That was really informative, Aditya. So let's take in some questions now.
Yeah.
So Veena is asking, could you please elaborate a little more on the T-shaped learner?
Sure. T-shaped learner is, if you look at the alphabet T, because we live in a world, Tina, right? We live in a world where the teams will become smaller. Okay. Example, you are someone who's working on Java, right? But you have a larger project which has everything else, and you are at a leadership role. It's very important that you not only, while you understand Java and maybe on the scripting side, it's very important that you also understand .NET. You also understand some other skills which the other peripheral team works, because you will get into a situation where you will be asked to manage teams or lead those teams to a delivery standpoint. Remember, I'm not quoting a project manager role. I'm quoting that you'll be asked to say, hey, can we deliver this together? We need to understand. So it's good. Look at the alphabet T, understanding your peripheral teams, understanding your peripheral function, and then becoming while you are SME in one particular area. It's like full stack is not the right answer, but yeah, if you're on the back end side, but at least you should have some understanding on the UI side and then moving it forward. So peripheral areas like alphabet T.
Right. Sangeeta is asking here, she's trying to understand the context of the slide shown. Are we trying to get into why change in career is good?
Why change in career? So I didn't understand. Why change in career is good?
Yeah. Sangeeta, would you like to ask the question? We'll just get back to this. Meanwhile,
Sure.
Vineet is asking, can you just elaborate on cognitive learning?
Yeah, cognitive flexibility is, and I will recommend for all of you to research on it, but then your ability to look at multiple information at one time and then delivering it on. Because you will get into a situation where you're delivering on one particular thing and suddenly you're expected to deliver on something else. When something is going wrong, even if the other thing which you're focusing, you are always, your mind is always on top of it, right? Its example is you're having a bad day, and then even if something is going right, you say, that's okay. If everything was fine that particular day, you would have looked at it. So doing multiple things at the same time, but also your ability to look at things far more clearer, seeing through the lot of information and seeing what is right and wrong from a trend standpoint is cognitive flexibility. It will play a very, very important part. It's, how do you call it, more like a visioning perspective, but I would recommend people to look at that.
And Nagendra is asking something related. So what is the best way to source and improve cognitive and decision-making skills?
Yeah, put yourself in, troubleshoot yourself into a lot of situations. There are a lot of games and a lot of online stuff which is on cognitive flexibility. I don't know, there is one guy who's written a book. I will not propose anybody's name, but my recommendation is look at that. The problem is when we look at a problem, we try and solution it in one way, right? The simple solution to anything is, if you're solving it the same way, the output will be the same. So you need to change where the input is coming from to get a very different output. So look at doing it a little more differently. Put yourself in some of those situations, learn from what it is, read books on the area what you are, right? Supposing somebody is in technology, try and not only look at your technology, try and look at trends, what is happening in technology, what are the other things which is happening, which will enable your mind to look at things a little more differently.
Right. Raghava is asking, current workforce also has many aspects of these future skills. So how different are they when we compare past and future?
If your workforce already has it, you're in the right place, but majority of the workforce don't, because that's the reason a lot of companies let go of people, because they're not hiring from a futuristic standpoint, right? From an individual standpoint, the best example is if you're looking for a job and if you're 100% fit, then you're not a fit, right? Because you will get bored after a period of time. You need to be a 70% fit. So a lot of organizations pivot into something new as we move forward from a career standpoint. So that's how it is. It changes a lot. Some of these skills are there, but a lot of these skills are not present from a peopleistic standpoint, because when you get done in an HR interview, a lot of people don't know why were they questioning me on this, right? So example, I'll just give you an example, right? Biometrics does gaming as an assessment, right? They look at your culture fitment, and there is no other way of fibbing it, right? You need to play the game for you to understand. So companies are getting into that situation. They're trying to enable you to look at what is a fit from their angle.
Vimal is asking, what will be the role of AI in our future work?
Oh, this is a very delicate topic, as we I'm sure you can have a separate webinar. I'm not an SME one in AI, and I have my own point of views, but my thinking is, as long as it's beneficial to you to understand and deliver on some of those things, help you grow, I think so it'll play a very important part in educational institutes, because you'll get a lot of information. But how do you use it? How much of information are you ready to share? Will play an important part. It's a very delicate topic, so I don't want to discuss. Sorry.
Shweta is asking, please share some more examples on me economy to we economy.
Yeah, so as I said, Shweta, organizations look at, I'm sure, Shweta, you, okay. Look at organization 10 to 15 years back. They used to look at themselves and only work on that, what needs to get delivered. They were not worried what the competitor, what the competitor was doing was more about trying to see how they can better themselves from that angle. Today, the organization is looking at from a very different angle of saying that, what is my community doing? What am I helping the larger community? Because the generation which is walking in, they want to understand the mission of the organization, right? They're not looking at only a 9-to-5 job. They're saying, I'm going to spend most of my life here. What is so different about you, right? So it's becoming more like a community, everything. And we've seen that in COVID era, right? You were in that situation where you understand what's happening. CSR is a very good example, where earlier it was not there in organization. Today it is, right? You have companies investing in lakes, ponds, and everything, that all that happening from a community angle. So organizations have moved for not only looking at themselves from a larger community. And the last one is, look at 15 years back, there were no meetups. Today we are sharing information for free, right, with each other. That itself is a V economy.
Right. Gayatri is asking, with everything happening online and digitally, how do we help people and improve people management?
Yeah, so see, it's a very tricky question. One, depending on the role, if if the role is more of an individual contributor role and you're working from a remote place, it is still fine, but you need to still try and meet up to understand. My recommendation is try and spend more time with people one-on-one if you're going to be online and on a digital phase to understand their aspiration and everything else from a career standpoint. The problem is, we once we get into the online space, we can't, you know, look at people's timings, right? Today, 5 to 7 can be anything to you, right? And 5 to 7 will be in the evening will be very different for me, right? So understanding and cutting those lines, but then also understanding people of saying that what do I need to deliver? What is my expectation? If you do those one-on-ones more together, I think so you can create a better team, better structure, and then you bond over a team. Okay, have calls, and this is my perspective only. Have calls where you don't have an agenda. Some people will join, some will not. Let it be an open discussion, right? Have saying that, because if you're going to be virtual, you're missing the water cooler discussion, right? You're missing that speaking to somebody else. So you need to evolve as we move forward, and people are ready to do that.
Right. Kushagra is asking, is it better to be at a people management role in a smaller organization or to be at an individual contributor in larger organization with flat hierarchy?
That's on your individual goals, right? You can ask anybody. See, you need to devise the pros and cons of what you want to do from a career standpoint. A lot of people are very good, very strong individual contributors. You need to see what your strengths are, and then move accordingly. But remember, even if you are an IC, individual contributor, you need to work in a fashion that you work with a larger team and everything gets delivered, right? People management, yes, it's good to do people management, but then you need to have an understanding of what your team is delivering. You can't have somebody who's managing the team, but he doesn't even understand the tech stack of the team. So it plays an important part. It's a 70-30 or 80-20 type of role, but you need to see what works for you. Both have their plus and minuses, but interpersonal skills will play an important part. Even if you're an IC, just don't say that I've done my work and my hand is up. You need to maybe help the team of saying that. Become a team player is what I'm saying.
Right. Vineet is asking, isn't cognitive flexibility brings distraction, and how will be useful for the job that needs focused approach?
So as we move forward, you might be doing a lot of multiple jobs as we get into a world which is far more faster, far more multi-focus. So it is not a distraction, but if you're doing one siloed work and you're just having a bad day, that itself is a very different perspective, right? So you need to look at multiple things. How do I say that? I'll give you to some of you who watch football. There is a player called Kevin De Bruyne. He plays for Manchester City. He's supposed to be the best supplier because his ability to look at a lot of things, what is happening in front and where the striker can be in due course of time, and he supplies the ball there. He's known for that. That's cognitive flexibility, right? Your basic flexibility is, okay, I will pass the ball and then we'll see how it happens. So I think that's a very crude, but I feel that's the right example.
Right. This is a very domain specific. If you can answer, how to choose future skills in the field of digital marketing?
Sorry, not an SME, but my recommendation is understand those SMEs into further, further sub levels, because the power today of social media has moved from marketing to employees. So how do you use employee advocacy from a very different angle to leverage them, to enable them? So earlier digital marketing was, they used to do stuff. Today we are living in a world, they would give information to the employee and they enable them. So how do you enable? How do you work? How do you get information? How do you see trends will play an important part. That's my perspective.
Right. Vartika is asking, as a leader, what are the must-have attributes to lead the team, and what is one of your important aspects you look for hiring in your team?
I think, see, everybody has a very different way of working. Mine is more like an enabling role. So I look at, I think trust plays an important part, and your ability to learn plays an important part. I think rest all is trainable is what I would look at from a team perspective. And, anything which keeps you going, because you can become an SME in one particular area, but if you don't have the trust and if you don't have the ability to learn and take your step next forward, I think so, rest all can be noise. So
Right. Shraddha is asking a very long question. So, how do we actually get to know about an organization? Because recently she realized that you cannot write a negative review about any previous organization, and she also fears that it might not give a good review on purpose to the next company that she'll join. So, what do you think about such a situation?
yeah, so if you're going to apply or learn about an organization, spend time in Google reviews or Glassdoor. The other best place is speak to people in those companies for you to understand why were they working. Also try and speak to people who have worked in that company and ask them why they left. So it'll give you a very different perspective of what is required and what is not required from a career standpoint.
Right. Tamal is asking, how do you analyze the value of your skills, the skills that you have?
For working so long in an organization, sorry, looking at your ability to deliver things year on year and then bettering yourself every year. The problem is people say, okay, I found a good way of doing things. But the question, the best trick is to always say, how do I better this the next year? Am I doing it the right way? So questioning yourself, doing surveys from your team, getting feedback, having more control over things plays an important part.
Right. And there are multiple questions regarding the gap years. So, people have a gap year or 2 or 3.
Doesn't matter. Nowadays, it's not an important part. Maybe 7 years back, if you have a gap, people would look at it honestly. People have the right or the wrong reason. If you have the right reason, it should not be an issue. As long as you are able to deliver and articulate what you have been doing and show your success, I think it doesn't matter to an organization.
Right. Madhukar is asking how to avoid or control last minute backdrops from the candidates in competitive market.
Offer reneging. Yeah, it would have been, you must be talking 1.5 years back when they had too many offers. But I think so putting checks and balances into place post offer and making sure that these candidates join, that means you need to have constant connect with these guys. You build a program of a post offer connect of saying that we will have these many touch points, we will have a buddy, we will have someone from the HR team, we will have constant connects, we will send them information about why they should join your organization. Keeping a candidate warm plays an important part from a long-term perspective.
Right. Could you share some views on gig working in organizations?
It is still coming up because gig, if you look at and close your eyes, you look at someone with a guitar from an individual standpoint. So, gig is still coming up because you need to be an SME. You have sites like Upwork in US and a few other places which are very good at, looking at gig, but it is still coming up in India from a long-term perspective. But there are some projects where organizations prefer a gig worker because they need to get this work delivered for a particular period of time. But for you to become a gig worker, that means you should be a specialist in this area, right? There has to be a reason for the organization to pick you up and say, okay, you can get this delivered. So it's a double-edged sword, still coming up, but in the non-traditional workplaces, it's higher anyways, right? So
we'll take up the last question. So there are multiple questions on domain change. Like some of them are into project and they're looking for a change in consulting or a chemical or manufacturing. So what's your suggestion on that?
So change, two reasons. My thinking is, think why you want to change. What's the long term make a plan of saying that if I stay in this, what will be a long-term growth, which you can look at anybody's career. If I change, what's my long-term growth? Now, if you think that you have to change, that means you need to understand what's happening in this area. Either you train yourself, either you pick up things, or you say, hey, I'm ready to learn, maybe come at the same level or a junior level for me to understand and deliver from a long-term perspective to see what works. Plain, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, honestly. Sometimes I have seen people who change and then say, I think I missed working there. It is okay to make, it is okay to fail, guys. So, that's how all of us learn. You can't have the more the perfect CV, the more I'm worried, right? So, and then also talks about people's inability to experiment, right? It is fine to say, and then say, okay, this way I realize what I don't want to do, right? Look at from that perspective.
Right. Great. So any closing comments for our attendees, Aditya?
My quite a few questions, and I know that's still coming up, but thank you very much for your time. My 2 cents, as I said earlier, is be a constant learner. Learning plays an important part. Irrespective of your years of experience, keep learning. Look at industry, look at how the market is moving, listen to podcasts, listen to some of those people. Even if you retain 5% of it, will help you from a long-term perspective. That's it.
Thank you so much. It was very insightful. I learned a lot, and I'm sure our attendees enjoyed it a lot. Thank you so much for your time on a Friday evening, Aditya. Means a lot.
Thank you. Thank you
Thanks
very
to
much.
all the attendees for attending the session and all for all the questions. And we'll see you next week. Have a happy weekend, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Aditya. Bye.